Hi everyone, Aiden here with etrailer. Today we're going to be taking a look at and showing you how to install this Rhino Rack Roof Rack system on our 2022 Ford Maverick. Now a roof rack is good for a number of things, especially here on the Maverick. We do have a shorter bed, so anything longer like lumber or a kayak is hard to put in the bed. Putting it up on top of the vehicle might be a better option, especially with kayak carriers being so easy to mount on these roof racks. I see that being a really big benefit here and not having to worry about the small bed space. Or you can get a bike rack up here if you don't want to put one in the hitch or in the bed. And you've got the options for roof boxes and baskets. If you don't have a tonneau cover for your bed and you want to keep some stuff safe and secure and you don't have the room inside, the roof is the next best place to go because you can have a box that's locked up or just get that stuff in a basket strapped down on top. Whatever you do decide to carry, just make sure you stay within the weight capacity of 165 pounds. As far as roof racks go, that's a pretty standard amount, and it's a pretty good amount. So anything less than that, I'd maybe be a little wary of just because it does limit you quite a bit, but 165 pounds should be enough to get you going. So let's talk about some of the pieces of this roof rack kit because that is a full kit. The crossbars up top are going to be the main piece. These are going to be 54 inches long, and on the Maverick, they don't leave a ton of overhang on the sides. Now, if you wanted to get longer bars, you could get those separately. If you wanted to use this with something like a load assist kayak carrier that will help you load up a kayak, you do need overhang on your crossbars to make those work, so that's just something to keep in mind. If you don't plan on using something like that, then this should be just fine. I think it gives a really nice complete look to the Maverick, and I like the fact that it doesn't have too much overhang. It makes it look like it fits really well in the truck. Now on the end, you've got end caps that can be removed using the tool included in your kit, and that will expose the inside T-track. So we can peel up this rubber stripping and use the T-track to attach different accessories. Just keep in mind that you will have to cut and trim that weather strip to length. That's one thing about Rhino Rack's roof racks that I don't love, because with other systems like Yakima, you can just slide your accessories in and that rubber strip will conform around it, no cutting needed. The other method, if you don't want to worry about any sort of modifications like that, is to just clamp your accessories around the bars, and that's probably the most common one. And for me, that's probably the way I would go too. These crossbars are an elliptical shape, and they're going to work really well with pretty much any clamp out there. It's a pretty standard size, and you've got more than enough room underneath the bars to attach those clamps without interfering with the roof. As far as how much room you have, at its lowest or closest point, you've got 2 3/4 of an inch from the roof to the bottom of the crossbar. Again, more than enough room for any sort of clamp that you might be attaching. And then from the roof to the tallest point of the roof rack is going to be 4 inches. So it doesn't add too much height to the vehicle either. Your mounting locations for the crossbars are fixed, and that distance between your crossbars is going to end up being 28 inches. That's going to work really well for pretty much any accessory. Most accessories will have some adjustability with their clamps so they can meet different crossbar spreads, but 28 is a really good kind of middle of the road number that should work well with a lot of accessories. One thing I will point out with the Maverick specifically is going to be the antenna placement. It's kind of in an inconvenient spot and comes really close to the roof rack here because roof space is pretty limited. Now, depending on the accessory you plan on putting up here, this may or may not be a concern. Any sort of kayak carrier that holds the kayak more vertically, or maybe a bike rack where you can kind of offset them, probably not going to be an issue because you're not going to be coming into close contact with this. But any sort of basket or box, I would be wary of this because this is going to limit our space quite a bit. Now, there's a couple different solutions you can come to here. You can just remove it by unthreading it, or something I would probably do myself is actually swap this out for a shorter antenna. And if you do choose to do that, anything that is 2.5 inches or less will clear with the crossbar. So if you do plan on adding one of those aftermarket, just make sure it's shorter than 2.5 inches. And you won't have any clearance issues with the crossbars. The legs are what attach the crossbars to the base of the roof rack system, and those are lockable. So upon removing those, it exposes all the hardware that we use to attach the roof rack. And whenever we put it back in place and lock it up, it keeps all that stuff safe and sound so no one can mess with it when we're not around, and it gives the roof rack a pretty complete look. And the final piece of our puzzle is the fit kit underneath. These are the rubber pads and the clamps that attach. These are going to fit and match the contours of our roof since it is a naked roof and it doesn't have any pre-existing rails or mounting points for threaded bolts. This is what lets us attach it, and that clamp will just go on the inside of the door jamb here, clamp underneath, and you can just shut the door on it like that. It actually works out pretty well for naked roofs. I've had a roof rack like this on my car for many years now, and it's always worked out well for me, and I've never had any security issues with it. As far as the installation goes, it's going to be really straightforward. Rhino Rack does a great job at making a system that's very easy to install. There's really only 2 bolts we need to worry about and 1 tool that comes with the kit. So let's go ahead and show you how we got ours installed. We're going to start our installation off on the ground with our crossbars. Now I've already got the weather strips installed in the top. It's really easy to do, just pop them into that top channel, and then on the very ends you'll need to cut one of them to length. So just make a cut and get that popped in. Then I've also got the end caps off so that we can slide our legs in. These are going to be having a bolt and a block. I'm going to leave that block loose enough so that we can move it back and forth and slide this into the track on the underside of the bar. As we slide it in, you will also have a measurement strip, much like the weather stripping up top, that we can cut to length. These crossbars aren't staying on the vehicle though, so we're not going to cut those strips and make modifications to it. We're just going to take our measuring tape and measure out the distance between the end of the track and where it meets the leg. And again, for that strip that's included, you would just cut that to the length specified in your instructions, and then you can butt it up right against the cut you made. Once you've got it in position, tighten it down using the included tool, and repeat that process on the other side. A quick note with the tool that's included, as you're tightening these bolts down and pushing with your thumb on this curved part here, it'll start to flatten out, and once it flattens out, that's when you know it's properly torqued down. We'll see this later again during the install as we do the clamps. At the bottom of the legs, we can turn our attention to our fit kit. These are going to be the rubber pads that come in a separate box with all your hardware, and what we need to look at with those is the number on the bottom of the pad and an arrow. Your front crossbar is going to have 2 different numbers, one for the front passenger, one for the front driver side. And the rear crossbar, it's going to be the same on both. The only thing we want to pay attention to is that arrow, and make sure that when we have this set up on the vehicle that the arrows are facing outward. The bottom of the pad that has the number and the arrow is what's going to be touching the vehicle. So I'm just going to get it over to the leg, match the holes up, and get it pushed into position. Now we already have our front crossbar in place because in your instructions they give you measurements for the correct places to put these bars. The front crossbar, you're going to go to the center between the 2 doors and measure to the center of the bar where you can see an arrow. That's going to be a certain measurement specified in the instructions, and the rear crossbar is going to be based off of the first one, so we're going to do the front one first. I'm just going to set it up loosely in place for right now. And it can help to have an extra set of hands on the other side of the vehicle to guide things over. But generally, as long as that pad is fitting around the lip on the roof here, it should be fitting on the other side just fine, so long as our other measurements are good. From there, we can grab our tape measure and take a measurement from the center of our front crossbar to the center of the rear one. Right where that arrow is a good measure of center, and make sure that it matches the measurement in our instructions. Whenever you're making those adjustments, just make sure you make it on both sides to make sure that the bars are running parallel to each other. And make sure that as you're doing that, the pad is still making good contact around the lip of the roof. With everything in place, we can get it clamped down. The clamps are going to be the same for all 4 locations, and so are the bolts, so no need to worry about those. And what will happen is the bolt will feed through the hole in the clamp and thread into a block located on the inside of our leg. It's going to be hard to see with my hands in the way, but just get it loosely started by hand. Make sure that you don't feel any sort of cross threading. And as you do this, just get it loosely secured on both sides. You don't want to fully tighten down one side because what it's going to do is just pull the whole crossbar over to that side. So you want to jump back and forth between the two bolts, making sure that they get tightened down evenly so that it keeps the crossbar even on the roof. Now, as we are tightening these clamps down with our tool, you will notice the clamp start to become more and more flush with the inside of the door here. That's perfect. Once everything's torqued down properly and our tool is flattening out like we saw earlier, we want to make sure that there's really no gaps in there and everything's making good contact. Once that's done, the install is complete. We can finish things up by just popping on our end caps, both for the crossbar and locking it with the included tool, and the towers or the legs themselves. Using that included key, making sure everything's secured. I always like to give it a good shake test just to make sure everything feels nice and solid on the roof and that I'm not seeing any movement or gaps in any of the clamps, but everything looks really solid and I'd say that we're good to go. And that'll do it for our look at this Rhino Rack Roof Rack system on the top of our 2022 Ford Maverick. Thanks for watching.